Welcome to this week's episode of Lifts, episode 36. We've got a very special episode coming today, all the way from Hadrian's Wall. We're gonna get a little bit of a history lesson for Mo as well. So Mo, fire away. What's the English history that you're dying to learn from Mr. Paul Bedford?
Well, we have a special guest on today, Matthew. As you mentioned, we have Dr. Paul Bedford, who is a researcher, an international speaker, and a fitness industry expert on retention, attrition, and customer experience. And we were talking before we hit record about where we all are. You and I are in our regular places in Washington and Newport Beach, but Paul is in Durham in the UK. So we got into asking what
Durham, Mo. It's not
Durham.
Durham.
Okay, I even butchered
Durham.
Durham. Okay, so I'm familiar with the Durham in North Carolina here in the US, but Paul, you started talking about the history behind it, and I thought it'd be very interesting for the audience to know a bit about the location.
Yeah, so Durham's one of those places where where it is in the northeast of England, it has probably one of the most famous and recognized universities in Durham University. It's up there with Oxford and Cambridge and the big boy universities around the world. But we're location wise, we're not far from Newcastle, and we're just south of Hadrian's Wall, which was built by the Romans to separate England from Scotland. And I think even today that wall still exists, even if it's physically fallen down. There's a cultural shift as soon as you pass the wall. It's like you're in Scotland, you're not in England anymore. And when you get that wrong, you will suffer. And just to give you an example of that, I was in Scotland and I was in a cafe one morning and they had English breakfast and Scottish breakfast. And I said, what's the difference between the English breakfast and the Scottish breakfast? And they said, in the Scottish breakfast, you get a sausage, but instead of it being round, it's flat and square. It looks more like a burger, like a Wendy's burger.
Mhm.
You get a sausage, you get beans, you get eggs, you get a thing called white pudding, which is a mix of different things. You get toast, and they listed all these things. And they said, and we serve it on an oval plate and you get tea or coffee. Oh, lovely. I said, what's the difference between that and the English breakfast? They said, you have black pudding instead of white pudding, and we serve it on the floor.
That's fantastic.
Okay.
Well, there's definitely, I mean, I've been learning, and I spoke recently to one of our clients who's named Gareth Jones. I know there's a lot of Gareth Jones. I mistakenly identified him as being English, but obviously he's Welsh. She's like, well, you should know that that name is a very Welsh name. So is that same gap there between the Welsh and the English?
It's not as strong as the English and the Scottish, but that's because mine and Matthew's English ancestors treated the Scots so badly in order to have private land. We moved entire villages of people off land so that we could have places to go, and not myself and Matthew ourselves, but our English ancestors. So we were horrific, but I think we've been horrific everywhere. So, they got the same treatment they got everywhere.
Well, there you go, Mo. We were going to skip the intro, but now we've had this, great history lesson on Scotland. So, are you ready? Are you ready to dive into business?
To dive in, I took some notes. I need to dive into that a little bit further, but let's dive into what we have Paul here for.
Okay. Well, look, Paul, you're known as the retention guru. I know you don't like that term guru, but I think
Matthew, I'm learning to live with it. It's like it calls me it. My business is called Retention Guru, so people have just added that. So do you know what? I'm soft about it now. I'm like, do you know what? You can call me that if you want.
You're owning it, Paul. That's the main thing. And it's one of those things that being around you and the industry for a long time, retentions continues to be one of those things that we talk about a lot. But before this interview, I was kind of thinking about it and sort of, it's almost like, okay, the industry's been around for a long time, and I get generally the importance of incremental improvements within the business. But I was curious to say, like, where, since you got involved and you became the retention guru, like, where are we? Are we still having the same conversations about retention? Because I was thinking that probably there's two camps of of businesses. The ones that are not bothered about it and their business model is based on just kind of getting people to sign up, and it's like, look, as long as they can come in and have a free pizza on a Friday or whatever, then we're good with that. And then there's the other one where probably some of the smaller operators, and I'm generalizing, but where they're very customer service focused. They do a great job. They create communities, and really, really nice, clean gyms, and they don't really have an issue with it. So I was just curious, how would you frame where retention is in terms of where it was probably 10 to 15 years ago, where it is today, and what are some of the key issues that we're still wrestling with?
I think that where we've come from is, I think, as a result of the work that I've done and some of my colleagues have done, we have a lot more knowledge now about what actually affects retention in terms of lifetime value and the individual factors that you can manipulate within a business to improve that. I think people still struggle, a lot of businesses struggle with understanding retention is an outcome. It's not a physical thing. It's like there are lots of things you can do to improve retention. It's a little bit like there's a lot of things you can do to lose weight. And if you start doing any of them, it'll have an effect. But if you could optimize which ones would have the biggest effect on you. And that's why I think we've got more understanding of the things a business can do. So if I go into a business and they say, we don't have any staff, but they've got a beautiful facility, it's 24-hour access, it's like, well, then we're going to have to go digital with this. If you want to improve the lifetime value of your members, you've got to go digital. If they're talking about, actually, we've got staff, but we don't know what the staff need to do, then we can go, okay, here are the activities, the day-to-day behaviors those staff need to perform that will contribute to lifetime value. I think there's still a lot of businesses, and I understand this, that are profitable. And as long as they're profitable, it's like, I'm not going to change the formula that makes me profitable and perhaps need to do more work. So if I've got a club and it's making me, 10, 20% profit every year that I can take home as a salary, I'm either going to just keep rolling that along because it's easy to do that. And if I want to scale my business, I'll just replicate that model rather than going, actually, I want to make 20% more than I'm making by improving the one I've got. I'll just open another club and another club and another club because we know that works. And so I think the business motives, depending upon whether you're building a business to sell that business, depending on whether that business is private equity funded and it's got to show growth, whether it's listed and it's got to show like how it's evolving and attracting new markets, will determine where people put retention within their scale of what they want to do. But I think the thing that challenges most operators is that retention is such a lag measurement. The things you do at the moment take a while to show up. And if you don't use the right metrics to measure the changes, you could put a strategy in that works really, really well. The metrics you're using don't pick it up. And then you abandon it or go, we tried that. It didn't work for us. But actually either they didn't follow up for long enough or they didn't measure it in the right way. So I think that's where we're at. I've got some really high profile operators, multinational operators who I'm working with currently. And then I got a message today on Facebook from a guy that I work with, or two guys I work with, who've got a small group personal training business. And he's just written it's going to be a testimonial because I'm just going to take it. He goes, you've added 10 months to our lifetime value of our small group training. He said, and we had you in for one day. And so I just gave them practical things to do. But so much of our industry doesn't focus on it. There's very few people that have looked at what the mechanics of this are. And I suppose that's where I'm at. It's a long answer, sorry about that, but I think that's where we're at now.
Is a lot of what you do about getting the right systems and processes in place throughout it, or is it a very customized, tailored approach, or is it a bit of both, depending on where the businesses are?
So the way in which we work is resource-based. What resources have you got? And based on what resources you currently have, what are the things you can do? Now, if I was working with a business that was a complete startup, I would come in and I go, okay, make sure you've got great sales funnels, make sure you've got great marketing. And once they've agreed to join, here are the things you need to do. X, Y, Z, keep going, blah, 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 blah. And you could just map it out. Now, how you can scale a lot of that with digital, some of it is requires training though for the human element of it. Because if you've got staff, you need staff to be able to deliver some of the types of interactions. And they're not so, I'm a psychologist and they're not so sophisticated. You need a psychologist to do it, but you need to have someone deliver like a curiosity based question with a level of empathy that feels genuine, not just, oh, do you want fries with that? Do you want to go large? It's not that automatic statement. It's something that has a human element to it.
Do you ever look at when you get asked to see these businesses? Do you ever look at the product itself? Because ultimately,
Yeah.
you can do great marketing, you can provide great training, but a lot of it's surely got to come down to the quality of the product. So do you ever go into these businesses and look at it and say, hey, what you really need to do is get your product, up a little bit before you can, what I can
Yeah.
do is going to provide any value.
Oh yeah, no. Recently, I've been into a site that I thought was going to be mind-blowingly wonderful, and it's probably at the worst place I've been into in the last 5 years. And they're saying, "Can you help us keep our members?" And I'm looking at their facilities, and I'm thinking, "Well, We can do all the things we normally do, but actually, if we drive volume of visits to a poor experience, it just means members are going to have a more frequent poor experience. And so we might end up driving attrition, but there's not a lot in the budget for them to sex up their facilities and what they've got. So there are times when it's going to be, I almost feel like I need to be Harry Potter with a magic wand and go, how am I going to make this happen? But I think that's the joy of what I get from work is like, can I come up with a solution? Can I come up with something that's going to have an impact? Certainly, if this organization had money to invest in their building, I would need to do less. But the impact of the building diminishes over time unless things are broken. So the first time I walk in, I see some of the designs you've put in and some of the places you've built, and you walk in and it's like, wow, that's amazing. But if you go there on a regular basis, that diminishes relatively quickly to just being the place I work out. And therefore, the actual experience that's being created has to take over from there because the building it loses its wow. But when you don't have that wow to start with, it's going to be a challenge.
Well, you mentioned the concept of empathy. And I
Mm,
think when you look at the business that we're in, it's often overlooked. And I feel like it's an often overlooked part of strategy. I mean, I remember when I founded the business from a digital perspective 12 years ago, I actually started there and I said, how can we use digital as a way such as that we could meet the customer and the member where they are? And
mm,
at the time, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this today, so much of the infrastructure that was built around gyms and memberships are really focused on the front end on the sales side, right? I mean, Mark Mastroff kind of created this sales engine, which worked for decades and decades. But then digital came around in the 2000s, mobile computing came around in the 2010s and really grew. And all of a sudden, that front end sales engine wasn't enough to retain a member through the experience. So you convert them from a sales perspective, but then how do you meet them and I get to using your word, empathize with them to retain that member such as that they have a good experience and you increase the lifetime value of that
yeah.
member?
First of all, I don't think enough businesses even bother. I think a lot of them just go, if we're not going to keep them, how else can we front load the sales process to get more money out of them? Because if we know they're not going to stay very long, why don't we bundle in or try and sell personal training or small group training? And so they're rushing to front load the sale even more because it's like, we won't keep them. We might as well get as much money as possible. So I think we've evolved from just that sales process to actually extending the sales
Hmm.
process. And just when the member thinks they've finished buying, we add another layer of buying to it to try and think, can we get an extra $500 out of them? Building empathy is it starts with building rapport, and I have a presentation that I give, and it says rule number one, establish rapport. Rule number two, attempt nothing else until you've established rapport. And it's based around the idea that if you want to help someone, you've got to actually understand where they're at. And I think the fitness industry gets really caught up in, look at the products and what we've got. You should be really excited to use what we've got rather than trying to understand where they're at and where we start them on that product experience. There's way too much stuff laying around in gyms that is great equipment, great, easy to use, but no one ever teaches them how to use it. So it lays dormant in the corner.
The wait is over. Our new Escape Fitness catalogue has landed. This is the essential guide to all of the latest product innovations that are shaping the future of functional training. Bigger and better than ever, this year's catalogue is 190 pages, jam-packed with everything from eye-catching, bespoke functional training frames to some of the latest strength training equipment. So sign up today to receive the digital version today. So what are you waiting for? Go to escapefitness.com now.
That's a really good point. I mean, one of the things we've been talking about recently, an incredibly valuable tool, which we found helps in retention, has been this idea of assessments, right?
Yeah.
But gyms don't know how to use assessments. So many gyms, most of the ones that you and I know, have gone and they've invested in a STQ or an InBody or one of these products. But what do we find? It collects dust, yet it's a great tool.
Yeah.
What kind of role do you think equipment analysis tools? I mean, does that impact retention? Because people are always reaching. So they're like, okay, let me go buy this thing and put it there, and all of a sudden it's going to improve my retention. But if you don't use it, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah. So what I see often, and I'm going to answer this in two parts. One, the way it's sold is often, if you buy this, I'm going to call it a 3D scanner just to group everything together. If you buy this 3D scanner and you sell 100 scans, $100 each, it'll pay for itself. And that's how they're sold. But the operators are now tired of hearing that message because they've heard it about every product that we want to sell into them. What they have to understand is not everybody wants the measurements. So I wouldn't make it unless you're a specialist provider, I wouldn't make it a thing that everybody has to do. I wouldn't force people into it. But what I would do is I'd productize the experience of using the scanner of whatever type. So it's like we have a product, like it's a secondary spend thing. It's like if you join, or we have a membership that is designed for weight loss. Within that weight loss program, you get a scan, you get this, you get this, you get this. They don't know how to tell that story to their prospective customers and then use the data to help design the programs. But they have to explain what the data is in relationship to what the behavior should be. And I think we get hung up on the numbers. And I used to make this joke because I used to teach fitness assessment when we used skin fold calipers. And I remember watching someone in an assessment measuring, and they turned around and they went, "Oh, I know you said your goal was to lose weight because you feel you're overweight. Well, actually, I've just measured you and you're actually obese." And you just think, yeah, that went really well. So it's like the tool, they were using these harpens and calipers perfectly. So there was nothing wrong with the measurement. They got the output, but the way they interpreted the output relative to the person was just disastrous. And you could see the person being told they're obese. And so I think it goes back to this empathy thing of like, why are we using this tool to help the customer achieve this goal? And how are we going to create a narrative around that? Because certainly, the data we've got is if you put people in those programs, not if they just use the scanner or the scales or the InBody or the Seika or whatever, if you create it into a program, it has an effect on retention. Slightly, some of it's because you book them in for a 12-week program. So in their heads, it's like, well, I'm going to be here at least 12 weeks. So you get them through that initial period of getting used to visiting and starting that behavior. But I think just trying to get everybody to go and do it would be a mistake. Because if
how do you
I just wouldn't bother.
How do you think though, like this is more to your sort of psychologist side, how important is it, do you think, for people to come into any kind of program, whether it's doing some strength training or some functional training, to be able to see where they are when they started, and that could be any kind of random measurement. It could just be a number, and how they're getting on and progressing over time. Is this sort of like a human instinctive thing for us to feel as though we're getting somewhere, and to build that into what you're doing is good? Or is it depend on who, different people have different feelings about stuff like that?
I think so. And I think I think some people are motivated by the numbers. And I worked with a company, and they had a program that was medically biased, and they had this wonderful program. And they had this huge description. And I said, all you need to say to someone is, if you're the type of person that's motivated by the numbers, this is the ideal program for you. Now, if you're not motivated by the numbers, it doesn't matter what the numbers are, because you're going to have another goal that is, well, I don't care what the numbers are. I just want to feel like X, which is difficult to quantify, or look like this. So for me, I think within, maybe have have a membership, and then have 3 programs that people could buy into. One which is perhaps a health one which is specifically a weight loss one, and I can't think of a third one. But you don't have to put everybody through a program, because, Matthew, if you turned up and went into a gym and they said you have to do one of our programs, you'd be like, actually, I've got a program. I know what I want to do. I want to follow that. I just want access to your equipment. Whereas those who are new to exercise, I think we don't look after them anywhere near enough. We just, almost throw them to the lions and go, get in there and see how you survive. It's like, I think the expression's been used, gladiator school. You get in there and you're in and around all the big gladiators, and you're either going to survive or not.
Well, that's probably a good way to go into our second story. I'm going to come back to the. I'm going to come back to the. I'm going to jump from the second to the third, and just for Mo's benefit. But one of the things that we've been seeing is gymtimidation. So there's a number of different terminologies and stories around this, but essentially, since the pandemic, we seem to be getting a lot of people that are going into the gym for the first time. Boys, girls, young, old, number of different ways, and it seems as though they're coming into a very similar space from a design perspective and from an experience perspective as what it was previously. And yet there's a mix of people. And your explanation was really, spot on. Whereas we're thrown into the gladiator den. So you have got, young guys or girls that are suddenly in a gym wanting to do strength training. There's the big boys that have been there forever in their vests on the benches, and then people are trying to figure it out. So what are some of the things that you're seeing from that perspective that are worth sharing, and any thought or suggestions for people?
Okay, I think one that I commented on a while ago, which a lot of people suddenly went, oh, I've not thought of that, was coloured bumper plates. Because if I walk into a gym, and I was actually with a friend of mine, and he was standing talking to another couple of people in the gym, and we'd been working out. And the comment was, oh, I'm not going to go over there and squat because people laugh at me because they can see how much I'm lifting from the coloured bumper plates. And so I don't feel great because I'm using yellows and greens. They didn't even know the weights. They were going, I'm using yellows and greens, and everybody else seems to be using blues and reds. And so I feel, and these were men, they weren't boys, these were men talking about being intimidated in the lifting environment. And so I just made the observation. I was like, they made the observation, and I commented on it, saying maybe sometimes, again, we're designing things that aesthetically look great, because I have no issue with colour bumper plates, but not thinking about actually how that relates to the new exerciser, how it relates to the experienced exerciser. We want all the plates the same size. We want them in different colors. And in fact, we want people to know what we're lifting, whereas someone else will want more anonymity to that. And I think that's some of that we're seeing with the increase in operators that have a broad spectrum of members, looking at a lot of the electronic resistance equipment, where you can't see how much is being lifted. It's just because it's being generated as electronic magnets or some sort of resistance like that. So there's not just gym intimidation between men and women. There's gym intimidation, between women and women, but there's gym intimidation generally. And we've placed an awful lot of emphasis, I think, as an industry on the aesthetics. and what people look like. So, I listen to my niece she says she's going to the gym and she's kicking off indoors because she can't find the matching top for the leggings, because you can't now go without matching top and leggings. Whereas in the past, that was something that was, you didn't wear matching because it looked odd. Now you don't wear matching, it looks odd. And so I think there's people who come in and go, they think when they walk into the gym, it's going to be a challenge. And then they see a lot of people who don't look like them. And even if they don't see a lot of them, they see enough of them to go, I knew it would be full of people like this, and therefore I don't feel in place. Now, there's one other element to this, I think, that I'm starting to notice. I actually think there are gyms now that are generational, and some of the designs are generational. So I was building a presentation at home. My 22-year-old son walks past. He looks over my shoulder and he goes, "Oh, where's that?" I flick back to a picture of the East Bank Club because I was flicking through my slides. And I went, "Oh, that's the East Bank Club, and it's in Chicago." And he went, "No, no, it wasn't that one." And I flicked to the next one, and it was a very stylish CrossFit gym. I think it's called CrossFit Black. Very stylish. He went, "That one, where's that?" And I said, "Oh, I think that's in New York." Anyway, I flipped back, I go, "What's wrong with that?" He goes, "Dad, that's a your gym. That's an old man's gym." And I looked at it and I thought, do you know what? He's probably right, because I'm attracted to what the East Bank has to offer. Probably if I was in my 20s, I would probably be doing CrossFit, High Rocks, or something similar. But it's like, I want to go to a gym where people are like me. I don't want to go to a gym where people are like you. And so I think we get that intimidation. And recently we've done a lot of data for some big operators, and they're showing me their new gym designs and what they're rolling out. And I'm seeing the diversity of members getting narrower and narrower by age. So they're becoming places that attract a certain type of age band, whether you do that as generational or just, by actual age.
So you're not seeing more being sort of interest and general capability focused. It's more generational then. Is that what you're seeing? Interesting.
Yeah, I'm seeing that quite a bit. And I think what we're seeing, when people are saying, well, we've got more older members than ever. And I mean, yeah, that's because the type of fitness person who likes that type of workout that you've built is actually getting older, but trying to attract people of that age in now. So I'm 60, right? I had my 60th birthday last year. I've been in the fitness so I would go into something that my son would train in and happily train, but it's not the club I would join. Some of my friends who are 60, who you might try and attract into health and fitness, would go into some of the clubs I'd go into and go, I don't want to go there. It's full of young people. I don't know what I'm doing. I look out of place. I feel out of place. And they would look to go perhaps in the US to something like Lifetime, or I'm trying to think of some of the others, some of the country clubs like NAC, or, those clubs where people who, being 60 in a health club and unfit is still okay. Or they might be going to a YMCA, but they're not going to go to something that's bang on trend in terms of gym design, gym equipment, HIIT workout. It doesn't resonate with them.
One thing that I'm curious about is, do you see price and the delta in price between a premium and a high value, low price club have an impact on retention? Because the hypothesis, at least, is that a high value, low price club would have more people signing up, coming on top of the funnel. They could therefore afford, I guess, to not retain as well. But on the premium side, you have less people coming on top, like an Equinox, an East Bank Club, or a Lifetime Fitness. But because they have a more broader offering, their retention numbers might be better. I don't know this. I'm just going to ask your perspective if you've seen
Yeah.
a difference there.
I think there's a number of things here. First of all, price on joining does not have an effect on retention. Price only starts to have an effect when people stop using their facilities on a regular basis. So it's a price value thing. Now, so if I'm joining East Bank Club in Chicago and not using it, or I'm joining a Snap and not using it, both of them are not valuable. So the values decrease just because of my usage. So what we've seen is price becomes an issue for people when visit frequency decreases. Now, the type of person that might join an East Bank Club they might be slightly different from someone who's more price focused. And they go, actually, I don't mind paying 600 because I know, or $600 a month, or I don't even know that's the price, but because I know I'm going to use it. I know I'm going to get value from this, so I don't mind paying more for a really high quality club. But what we see is, going back to the first one, it's usually when they stop getting value that price becomes an issue. And I'd also say that we sometimes forget that for some of the people who are coming in at the low cost, high volume, that's still a decent proportion of their weekly salary. It's just not just because it's low, perhaps because we're earning decent salaries, doesn't mean it's a low price to them. And so when times get tough for them, it can be actually, I can't afford this. I got to pay for the kids' shoes. I've got to feed the family. Whereas at the higher levels, a decrease in revenue, or it's like, I'll replace my Mercedes next year rather than this year. So I think it impacts people differently.
One of the things that comes up a lot in conversation with a lot of the people that we're talking to is this premium fitness levels. We had a chat about the Planet Fitness Black Card a few weeks ago, them putting up their standard membership prices, but then also having their, an offering which is more expensive, that provide more services. There's a number of other brands that are also doing that at the moment, whether they're, Gold's Gym guys have got special rooms, escape rooms actually, where they provide a different level of service, more less crowded, premium experience, but with an uplift on membership. I understand UFC gyms have also got a version where they include recovery and a number of other services at just over $100, something like that. And now we've got also we've got people like EOS, which we've got this link here where they're actually looking to get influencers into the gym, which is something that probably other people are not doing, but you've got the whole, seems to be a whole setup where you can film yourself, you've got the nice backgrounds and all those kind of things going on. So it's clearly people are now looking at other options and packages beyond their membership, which is what you said earlier about, front loading the sale as much as possible because they might not stay longer. Like, are there any other positives that you can see from this type of solution, or things to consider if you're trying to get more of a premium offering without it, doing any damage?
Yeah, look, having the premium, I think there's two things in some of the premium offerings. One of them is product extension, like you say, like what Angel and the guys are doing at Gold's in terms of having these other rooms. It's saying you can have this, but you can also buy this as well now. And so it's the difference between going, I'm going to fly coach, I'm going to fly business, I'm going to fly first class. Actually, we're giving them the option to have higher levels if they want to. Absolutely fine. That is probably going to attract the type of person who's going to stay anyway. So I'm not sure they'll have an impact on retention. I think it's just an additional service that you can find out. You can get finance from. Some of it, when I look at it, when I see, we're now offering a $40,000 a year health membership that does this, and this. For me, that's price anchoring, because it makes the monthly normal membership actually really seem cheap. So if you've got a $40,000 a year membership and actually regular membership's $2,000 a year, actually now $2,000 a year doesn't feel expensive. My favorite example of that is Rolls-Royce sell Rolls-Royces at air shows. They don't go to car shows. Because at an air show, purchasing a Rolls-Royce is an impulse buy. You're looking at $15, $20 million jets. Oh, yeah, well, let me just get another Rolls-Royce. But that's where it is, that psychology of that must be inexpensive as the normal product. And it does actually allow you to increase your prices of your standard membership, because it still seems, you can put your membership prices up, you go, yeah, but it's not $40,000.
I like that.
And there will be a few people that want to buy it. So you do have to actually physically have it as a product to sell. But I see that as being mainly price anchoring and getting people psychologically to think, actually, that's my $2,000 a month is cheap, or $2,000 a year is cheap now.
Yeah, I think that is in reference to Equinox's new membership at $40,000, and we actually covered that around recovery and wellness, which is really kind of tied into this, because what we found is gyms like Crunch and Planet are really kind of offering these extra spaces as an upsell. But then you've got the other extreme that you talked about. But that's a really interesting point, Paul, because Matthew, we didn't really cover that as using that as an anchoring tool,
Mm.
such as that the regular membership seems seemingly affordable, even though you're right, it's about $2,000 a year. What I'm
Yeah.
curious about too is in these spaces when you're looking at investments that gym makes, and I want to move into point number 5 here around just wearables.
Mm.
MyZone states that, obviously this is coming from MyZone, that wearables helps improve gym retention by 22%. That's a very, very large number. And we've got this Keep Me article up here that's talking about how wearables and technology can help improve retention at clubs. We look at it as a lever from our perspective in that if we implement wearables, it's something else for the member to maybe engage in, but we
Mhm.
haven't quantified it in this particular sense because it is variant by cohort and by brand and house. But there's so many
Yep.
variants that we can't just do a blanket number, right? You can implement MyZone in the studio, you can implement MyZone in the whole gym, and there's so many variants here. But I'm just wondering from your perspective, when you look at implementation of technology, whether it's wearables or an AI tool, what's the kind of advice that you would give to the average gym or studio who's looking at that to help improve retention?
Okay, so well, first of all, let me just say I did that my zone retention research, and we had the data from a very large operator, and we were able to see, we knew which member, we were actually able to work out which members had my zone from their codes and their membership, and which members did not, and we just tracked that. So it was a historical cohort. So we weren't putting any interventions in. We were just measuring those who've got it versus those who haven't. But you're right, Mo. There's a huge variety of things that would affect that. And it goes back to my point about scanners and body fat measurement. It will be useful to some, but not to all. Some people will really care about it. I was a competitive cyclist for a long time. I used to measure the watts at my ankles in terms of the power output, my heart rate, my speed. I had everything, a periodized plan for the year. Now, all I worry about is, do I close my rings each day? And so I really used to quantify when I was competitive, but as soon as I wasn't competitive, I almost abandoned all measuring because it was like, it just became overwhelming. And when I look at, and I think it's the technology can really help us, but we have to identify, where does technology fit in our customer experience strategy? How do we leverage that technology to increase the experience and therefore the lifetime value? Not just it's new bells and whistles to make us stand out. We've got my zone, you haven't. It's like, we've got my zone, we have it for this reason, it works for these types of members, and this is what you get. Because certainly the people who use my zone, my partner uses my zone, and recently, that I know they had some issues recently, and she's on track to be Hall of Fame this year, and one of her workouts didn't get recorded, but she'd also recorded it on her Apple Watch at the same time, so she had the evidence that she did it, and it was just like, I am 7 MEPs short of what I need for the month because it didn't catch this workout, and I was like, and it was, my life at home was unbearable because of 7 men. But for her, it's a real motivator and it really draws her in. And it will have that effect on some new members, won't have that effect on all new members. And again, this is where I think we have to just be sensible and go, here's a strategy we can use. Digital interaction, the way we talk to people, I think is going to change. I think it's going to change dramatically. The use of AI will help us do things, but just using AI to do more marketing, to fill up the funnel more, might drive more people through the door. But actually, if you've driven the wrong people through the door, they're going to churn even faster. So I think we're at the infancy of what AI and other technologies can do, but they have to be in the strategy of the overall business.
Well, that moves us on to the next story. This was a post that you did on Facebook. Outside of you sharing the beautiful cafes that you visited in France, which we can talk about on a separate podcast. But one of the things you mentioned is are we, and I'm not using your exact words, but are we abdicating our training within the gym to YouTube. I thought it was an interesting story, and I'm going to just to put a slightly different spin on it. I was educating Mo about Sam Sulek. I don't know if do you know Sam Sulek, Paul?
I recognise that name. I might recognise what you're talking about as soon as it comes up.
Okay, well, this is the guy.
I know who Sam Sulek is.
Yeah. So he's 21. He's got like 3 something million followers, and for that demographic, this guy's a god. This is where people go to find out how to train. Although he's got some very unconventional training methods, eating junk food, and it's a bit of a unique approach, which is probably why he's sort of broken through. But I guess the question is, like the gyms are competing with a lot of these very popular influencers that for them seem to have all the answers about how to train and what to train. So where do you sit on this? Like, I understand that as a gym, you probably don't want to be handing this over, but how do you compete? Do you absorb it and just say, hey, like, come in and use our equipment and follow your popular trainer on YouTube? Or is there something else that you're thinking that would be more sort of long-term and sustainable?
Again, I think this for me comes from, when we had the sort of the growth of the low-cost, high-volume gyms, it was like, there are no staff, it's access only. But what we're going to do as a business is we're going to charge personal trainers to work here, so we'll get another source of revenue. And if you want help, you'll buy personal training. But people went, actually, I can get it for free off YouTube. And you see them walking around with their phones and their online trainer programs doing their workout, because those people have made an effort to resonate, like Sam Sulek has, with an audience. And I don't know if he does, but I think if he launched a Sam Sulek program, you can subscribe to it for $30 a month, people will be inundated. But what he's done is he's connected with his audience. And I think what clubs have failed to do is connect with their audience. They've just seen them. I work with operators that refer to their members as units. We've sold 150 units this month. And I went, if you were selling air conditioning, I'd let you have that. But we're actually talking about people. But all the time you think of them as units, you're not actually going to engage them in any meaningful way that they're going to create any sense of community. So there's good stuff on YouTube. There's some really good quality stuff. If I was an operator with a low staff level, and I'd be saying, here are the people you should be following on YouTube. Here are the people that we think are actually giving the right advice. Because I don't think if you're a small business, you can't just spend enough time creating content just on programming, because it's a proportion of your members. It's not all of your members. So, but if you've got staff, it should be the staff that are engaging with the members and going, oh, what are you watching? Oh, let me show you another way of doing that. Here's another version of that.
How much is it, like, Mo, you've done an interesting project. I don't know if you could share about it, an AI concept. If I'm not saying use the names, but you could talk generally about the idea. But how important is it, do you as a fitness brand, health club, to be the expert, and so using technology and people like Mo to deliver world-class programs that are personalized to you, as opposed to it being very much about, I want to follow my influencer, my Sam Sulek or whoever the equivalent is?
I can give you some background to this. So we worked with a large premium health club in the US to really do a couple of things. One, like, as I'm sure you would agree, retention is improved when you have an actual personal trainer. So if you're able to engage in a good personal trainer who could then show you progress, build that affinity, build a friendship or the relationship, be part of a larger community, all the things you talked about, you are going to improve retention. But the problem is that, you're already paying a premium price for a premium product. Then you have to pay another $100+ per session to get this. It kind of prices a lot of people out. So we know that, well, they can't afford this, but we know that if they had this personalized training, it could be better. Then we saw the advance of AI. So what we were kind of tasked to do last summer is to say, well, we don't want to take the generic chat GPT route and just do whatever program. We've got a method that we're very proud of, decades and decades worth of data. So we took all this decades and decades of data from a very popular training platform that the club used. We trained its own large language model, and we built an AI tool such as that it reflected the very ethos of the club. And the way we implemented it is to say that we're going to create a program for you. We're going to assign you to a trainer who could then adjust the program and answer some basic questions, but you follow that on your own.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that not every club can afford to kind of build this type of engine, but this was just launched in June. So we're hoping that it's going to be a helpful tool in retention. But I'm wondering, what are some ways that digital could potentially help clubs, or these digital tools could be helpful if we know personal training is good, but we can't really afford it. People are coming in with their own YouTube kind of programs that they're following.
Yeah.
Is there some place in between that clubs could kind of go, and is AI the answer for that?
Yeah, look, I definitely think AI is the answer for that. And I think there are other tools where, and you've probably seen more of this than I have, it's like some of the camera technology that's available now that can actually watch someone performing an exercise and feedback on performance, building that in where and I I've seen things where they're filming 10 people at the same time. So you're not standing in front of one camera and you're doing the exercise. They're actually just filming the gym floor, and they know how much you're lifting, what your rep range, what reps you did. So they're basically capturing your workout as you go along. And I think where you start to take that technology and then AI and then go, based on your workout today, repeat that workout next time, because you weren't getting full range and you weren't completing all the sets. So you need to stay where you are. What you then, when they're ready to move on, go, okay, here's an alternative exercise, or here's another exercise or another set of resistance that you could work to. And I think there'd be a lot of people, because one of the things that I think people do like about AI and technology is it's non-judgmental. People would rather receive an automated message from their utility provider saying your gas bill, your electric bill is overdue, you need to make the payment, than someone ring them up and go, you haven't paid. Because the
Yeah.
automated version just isn't judgmental. And I think we're very quick to be judgmental in the fitness industry, even though we try not to be. Like, we look at everybody else working out and everybody else is training wrong because it's not the way I want to train. And I think where AI comes in and the technology comes in is creating non-judgmental, supportive services.
Which really kind of takes us back to one of your original points around empathy,
Mm,
right? If you kind of build a product and build a strategy
yeah.
that is focused and founded on empathy, you will have success. Well, I think we're up for time. One of the last things that we love to do on lifts is
Mm,
get your final thoughts of the week. So, Paul, I'd love to start with you. And we spent this entire episode talking about different retention
mm,
strategies. If there is one key takeaway in 2024 that a gym or boutique studio should implement to help improve their retention
yeah.
over everything you talked about, what would it be?
It would be focusing on the experience they're delivering. I know boutiques have done that, but we need lots of everybody to start thinking about, actually, when someone joins, what experience do I give them? And if I only give them the option of personal training and they don't take it, what do I give as an alternative? What's the secondary way of supporting them? Because you said no one's going to all buy personal training. We've been talking about member experience for years. Very few people are actually doing it. They it's all front loaded. It's like, let's just plan for the next 180 days, not the first 30, not the first 90. Let's see if we can keep them engaged for the first 180 days.
Matthew, any final thoughts on retention? Anything that you learned that was interesting? I'm sure there's a lot. I have a lot of notes here, but
Yeah,
what is your key takeaway?
there's a lot. I'm gonna skim through them really quickly, but I think they're worth highlighting. Paul mentioned the importance of a product. No matter what, no matter who you get on, whether it's a marketing expert or a retention expert or whatever, like you got to make sure that your product, you got a great product from the start, and that's probably where, I guess in some cases people go wrong and try to sell the hell out of a bad product. I think the second one is, what I've picked up is really understanding your demographic, and Paul gave a number of different examples about who it is and what they're looking for. But I guess the more you can really understand well your demographic, the more you're able to do other things. And I the operators I know that are extremely successful, meaning their businesses are making really good money compared to the ones that are not. You know that they really understand the people that come into their facilities. I like the point about anchoring. I think that's really interesting, and that comes a lot from knowing, having a good product and knowing who you're selling to. So things like that can work. And then the final one is this non-judgmental. The more I use Chat GPT, I was very skeptical about communicating with any kind of, these chat bots, because the experience was just terrible. And you knew it was a chat bot, and you knew they couldn't answer. And, I'd just like click out straight away because I just don't have the time. But some of the AI tools now, like, they're better than talking to a human. And so I can imagine that if you can kind of get the right type of product together, then people would be completely happy having that experience. And I can sort of testify that myself. So yeah, a lot there. We should definitely get you back on again, Paul. Go into a little bit more detail. I love the psychology tricks or techniques that Paul talks about. I could discuss them for hours because he talks about things that I've never ever thought about. Mo, final thoughts.
Well, I think something, Paul, that you said early on, which really resonated with me, is that retention is the lag measurement. And as an athlete, we know that we track heart rate, especially if it's a PPG-based heart rate monitor. It's incredibly lagged. So if you're training for performance or you're training for a race, we'll use power. If you're a cyclist, you use power because power is instant. If you're running, use power because running power is instant. Heart rate's lagging. And I never that really kind of occurred to me, and I had an epiphany. So many of our solutions that gyms ask us to build or gyms ask us to do is addressing retention at the point of when they churn. And we're trying to say, okay, well, because of this bad experience, they churned and we lost that person. But truly, it was a series of deliverables that you did not meet the expectation on that caused them to churn. So instead of looking at that point, you really need to look back. And I could talk to you, I'm sure, for that for hours, as Matthew mentioned, but that really gave me a lot to think about.
Cool.
Well, normally, Paul, I say, well, look, thanks for listening. If you've got anything from this episode, please share this with one or two other people so we can get this out to more people. Now, you being somebody who really focuses on wording and influence and psychology, like, what should I say at the end of our podcast to get people to share it and to subscribe and to tell more people about it?
If you value the quality of what goes on within the fitness industry, more people need to have better education and better understanding of what the current challenges are. So if you want to help yourself and you want to help the industry, share this with at least two people you know.
Fantastic. I think we just record that, Mo, and just like stick it at the end of each.
I think we do. Just put that on repeat at the end of each episode.
All right. Well, look, thanks again. We're going to sort of attach some links. So if anyone's listening is interested in getting in touch with Paul, we're going to put it in the YouTube links at the bottom. We'll include it in the emails, and we'll also on Libsyn and anywhere else that you're listening to. So thanks again. Been a great episode. Hope to see you face to face soon, Paul.
Take care, gentlemen. All the best.